One of my favorite Twitter influencers takes on gun control and takes it down hard. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. In the immediate aftermath of what turned out to be yet another school shooting, and you know the one I'm talking about because I talked about that yesterday, the Twitter influencer Dom Luker, breaker of narratives, released a thread dedicated to debunking the premises of gun control. In 25 tweets, Mr. Luker discusses not only the failures of gun control, but also how guns in civilian hands prevent crime. I'm going to lay out the thread, but also give you some background on gun control in the United States. But first, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Link in the description. And be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of great merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I've chosen for today, which reads, if you can read it here, as we're redefining everything, this is a cordless hole punch. Now, all joking aside, this is about what the militia really is, and it is not limited to something that conforms to the Militia Act of 1903. Someday, perhaps, I will discuss what was utterly wrong about that act, but for now, we're going to talk about gun control and what's wrong with that. One thing more, if you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can also click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come out with a new one. In fact, do you see the new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign in it? That's the super thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, so long as it's legal tender. Yeah. Now, first, some historical background. Criminals and criminal gangs are an unfortunate side effect of civilization. They've been with us ever since we had cities. Even ancient Rome had its gangs, which some politicians actually used to devastating effect sometimes. In the days of the Western frontier, gun control hardly existed, and certainly not on the frontier. Tales of citizens defending themselves and their towns from criminal gangs abound. The most famous is the Battle of Coffeyville, Kansas, between town residents and the notorious Dalton Gang. I have a link in the description to a 20-minute video describing that gang and how that battle went down. But then came Prohibition and criminal gangs inside major cities, organized to satisfy the demand for intoxicating liquor. Because these gangs filled a popular demand, law enforcement left them alone, or took their bribes, and the people shrugged, especially those who went to the speakeasies. The most notorious gang leaders were even celebrities, like Scarface Al Capone in Chicago, and his rival, Bugs Moran. But on February 14th, 1929, matters came to a bloody head. Several of Capone's men, disguised as Chicago police, laid on a raid on a garage that Bugs Moran was using. They stood the men inside against a wall and then systematically executed them. This St. Valentine's Day massacre turned public opinion against the criminal gangs. "Do something!" shrieked the public, recoiling in horror at the reports of blood on the walls. That something culminated in the National Firearms Act of 1934 and the case of U.S. v. Miller, 307 U.S. 174, 1939. I have links in the description to that act and the case. Jack Miller had challenged the National Firearms Act on Second Amendment grounds, but when the government petitioned for Supreme Court review, Jack Miller was nowhere to be found. Thus, gun control won by default. That decision said that, and I quote, "Only weapons that have a reasonable relationship to the effectiveness of a well-regulated militia under the Second Amendment are free from government regulation," unquote, Chief Justice Mac Reynolds, writing for the court. Who can tell how differently the court might have decided that case had Jack Miller followed through and paid for a Supreme Court response to the government's petition? In fact, absolutely any weapon can find a reasonable use by a well-regulated militia, but this toxic precedent drove the entering wedge for gun control, and for all its consequences, including, to paraphrase Ben Franklin, a society that has sacrificed essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety, and now has neither. Donald J. Trump has lately changed the composition of the court so that now the court is more inclined to protect the Second Amendment. See, for example, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, 597 U.S. blank, we don't have the page yet, 2022. But stubborn gun-grabber state governments have responded by defining virtually every place in any organized city as sensitive. Bear this in mind when evaluating Dom Luker's latest threat. Now remember, Dom Luker always begins his anchor tweets sarcastically. The real meat always follows, and this one has a lot of it. A real feast. I have links in the description to 13 tweets, the odd numbers, beginning with the anchor tweet. Thread. Proof that banning guns and the National Rifle Association would prevent every mass and school shooting in the U.S. Ha ha. The importance of location. Mass shooters select areas where victims are unable to protect themselves. Since at least 1950, more than 94% of large public shootings in the U.S. have happened in gun-free zones, areas where ordinary people are not permitted to protect themselves. International failure and motive. All of Europe's and Canada's major public shootings have happened in gun-free zones. In 2016, a young ISIS sympathizer planned a shooting at one of the largest churches in Detroit. It's simple, and a lot of people go there, he said, according to an FBI wiretap. Furthermore, firearms are not permitted in church. It would also create headlines. Fortunately, the ISIS sympathizer turned out to be a would-be shooter. An NRA ban would hurt diversity in the U.S. Gun owners now represent an increasingly diverse part of society. In the recent years, organizations like the National African American Gun Association, the alternative lifestyle group Armed Equality, and the Well-Armed Woman have grown. In an era when many people are questioning the role of law enforcement in their everyday lives, it makes sense for more individuals to assume personal responsibility for their own, their families, and their homes' protection. Following the firebombing of his home in 1956, Dr. Martin Luther King, who was also a Christian pastor, requested a firearms permit, but Alabama authorities denied him. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for Peace a decade later. The NRA rejected these discretionary gun permit restrictions and went on to give NRA charters to blacks seeking to protect themselves against Ku Klux Klan violence, including civil rights leader Robert F. Williams. Williams, a World War II Marine veteran, returned to Monroe, North Carolina to find the Klan on the rise, beating, lynching, and killing blacks at whim. For fear of Klan retaliation, no one would join the NAACP. Williams was elected president of his local chapter, which grew from 6 members to more than 200. But it wasn't until he received a charter from the NRA in 1957 and created the Black Armed Guard that the Klan had their comeuppance in Monroe. Williams' repeated repelling of deadly Klan assaults is detailed in his moving book. Well, actually, the title means blacks with guns. The word used is not the very bad word, but an obsolete term based on the Latin word for the color black. Moving on. The NRA's historic heritage of combating the Klan has been erased. by those who were involved with the KKK, Jim Crow, and racial terror, namely the Democratic Party. Now, when did the directors that are on the board of the NRA switch parties? That question is rhetorical, of course. Let's take a break here before we get into what gun-free zones are really good for. They're good at getting innocent people killed. Before I go on with that, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, employment issues, unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the past few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides, either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Now, let's talk about the success of gun-free zones. Over 90% of public mass shootings occur in gun-free zones, where individuals are not allowed to carry guns. People who have done nothing wrong and merely want to defend themselves would become criminals if such guns were prohibited. Greater regulation would disempower underprivileged people who face very serious violent threats. A total ban on assault weapons will save relatively few lives. What happens if this shinobi keeps his gun and you don't? Now click through to the picture and draw your own conclusions from what you see. Banning assault rifles won't help. The average age of mass shooters is 34, implying that raising the minimum age for obtaining weapons will not target the primary perpetrators of large public shootings. Few mass shooters have used high-capacity magazines. There is no evidence that the lethality of their attacks would have been affected by delays of 2 to 4 seconds to switch magazines. Some of the largest mass shootings in U.S. history were with low-capacity weapons. The Virginia Tech gunman used 2 pistols, one with a 10-round magazine and the other with a 15-round magazine, to murder 32 people and wound 17 others. He only had 19 additional magazines. A guy with 2 9mm pistols capable of max magazines of 15 and 17 rounds murdered 23 people and wounded another 20 in a Killeen, Texas cafe. A mentally ill guy with 2 pistols murdered 21 and wounded 19 at a San Ysidro McDonald's. The pistols used 13 and 20 round magazines. Why do Democrats ignore the person behind the gun? According to one study, 60% of mass public shooters had been diagnosed with a mental disorder or had demonstrated signs of serious mental illness prior to the attack. The most recent mass shooting occurred in Nashville, Tennessee, March 27, 2023. The shooter was identified as Audrey Idan Hale, 28-year-old transgender, well, female to male, that left she left 3 adults and 3 children dead. Today, meaning March 28th, NBC News reported that the Covenant School shooter also had a mental disorder. A large body of research shows a statistical link between mass public killings and serious untreated psychiatric illness. The most commonly diagnosed illnesses among mass public shooters are paranoid schizophrenia and severe depression. People will still murder without guns. Prior to the 2016 Orlando nightclub massacre, the worst assault on the alternative lifestyle community in America happened in 1973 when an arsonist murdered 32 people and wounded 15 more at New Orleans' Upstairs Lounge. In 1987, a disgruntled former airline employee hijacked and purposefully crashed a passenger airliner, killing 43 people on board. In 1990, an enraged ex-lover set fire to the Happy Land Social Club where his ex-girlfriend worked, killing 87 people. A truck bomb parked outside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, killed 168 people and wounded over 600 more in 1995. In 2021, a man named Darrell Brooks drove a sport utility vehicle through the annual Christmas parade in Waukesha, Wisconsin, killing 6 people and injuring 62 others. Removing guns increases terrorism. In other countries, bombings, mass stabbings, and automobile assaults routinely kill more people than even the bloodiest mass shootings in the United States. Take a look at the following. Now, this tweet embeds a diagram of a mass murder in London involving nothing more than a van used to ram people and knives for stabbing. The times given in this picture, the listed BST, that stands for British Summertime. That's their equivalent of daylight saving time. The reason America is labeled the safest developed country from terrorist attacks is that our enemies know there are millions of gun-toting patriots that can and will lay them down if they breach our land. It embeds a picture of then Senator John F. Kennedy, Democrat from Massachusetts, waxing eloquent on the importance of the Second Amendment. If we ban our guns, they have no reason not to come. End of thread. I also have links in the description to 11 tweets offered in reaction. As you have to expect, gun control still has its apologists. One of them tried to show that, I quote, gun restrictions have worked in every other country, unquote. Several users said the obvious. Bad actors switch to other weapons. But some people refuse to let facts convince them. I have links in the description to 4 tweets in a debate thread. In it, the one who insisted that gun control works in other countries denied that people would switch to other weapons and other forms of violence. You have to wonder at the lack of reading comprehension of some of these people, because the thread proves that people do switch to other weapons and other forms of violence. And in this debate, some would specifically mention stabbing attacks in the city of London. Other users had more simple answers to this user. The next 3 links give a sample of those answers. The first user cited Paris, France, very strict gun laws, and still that city saw 130 deaths and 400 woundings, all in one evening. The second pointed out that homicide rates did not decline appreciably in the United Kingdom or in Australia, and overall violent crime exceeded the levels before those societies banned guns. The third user made the obvious point. Outlawing murder does not stop it. Criminals keep their guns and use them. Another user makes this direct reply to Lucre, citing statistics that strengthen his case. To be specific, the United States sees fewer than 150 deaths from mass shooting events in a single year, amounting to 1/100,000% per capita. Most deaths by gunshot are either suicides or one-on-one homicides. And last, I have a link to a 3-tweet thread addressing the Nashville incident. The first user led by pointing out that the shooter first tried another school. It was a hard target, so she attacked the Covenant School instead. That led to a discussion of a point I raised yesterday. Does someone prime, groom, arm, and train school shooters? To say nothing of the Senate Democratic Caucus voting down a bill by Senator Ted Cruz of Texas to provide armed security in schools. And I repeat, these users realize, independently of anything I've said, that someone is priming and grooming these bad actors and actresses. Not only that, but some of the same commentators are appearing as if by magic on scene after bloody scene. Why? And whom in law enforcement can we trust, especially national law enforcement, i.e. the FBI? And now my analysis. This valuable thread shows all the reasons gun control does not work as advertised. The question then becomes, does it work for reasons no one in authority would dare advertise? Lugar doesn't say that officially, but recall his pointing out the diverse groups of people now arming themselves. He also points out that historically these groups have traditionally come under attack most often. Only recently have armed gangs attacked nice neighborhoods. We saw an example of that in 2020. And the one thing that would prevent that would be to allow all citizens and lawful residents in good standing to arm themselves. Judges exist to determine good standing. The right to keep and bear arms is a liberty subject to deprivation only through due process of law. Benjamin Franklin's obvious quote finds direct relevance here. So also does this quote, attributed to Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto of the Japanese Imperial Navy. He said, "You cannot invade the mainland United States because you would find a gun behind every blade of grass." Now, whether Yamamoto said that or not, events have proved it. President John F. Kennedy recognized the basic principle, although he could never have imagined that fears of tyranny in these United States would become real. Links to the description of the article, to the video about the Dalton Gang, to the National Firearms Act of 1934, to U.S. versus Miller, to the thread, to the 11 tweets in reaction, to my Declarations of Truth Twitter account, and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and oursilverlines.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. And on the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and links to my Second Amendment playlist, that Dalton Gang video, and the earlier video that I did about President Biden's divisive speech last September. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.